Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are, and welcome to our webinar today, Turbocharging the Rackspace Cloud with RightScale. My name is Elise Arthurs, and I'm the Director of Partner Marketing at RightScale. I'm excited to kick off today's webinar with one of our long-standing partners, Rackspace. We've got some interesting things to show you today in terms of how you can use RightScale to manage your Rackspace Cloud initiatives. We always start our webinars with a couple of polls so that we can see who's attending the webinar and tailor our information based on that. So if you could take a couple of seconds to answer these polls. The first one is up on the screen. And this is about if you're using the cloud today and in the form of infrastructure as a service, so either with Rackspace or with an Amazon. If you could take a couple moments to answer this question, we'll get a sense of how many of you are actually using the cloud today. Okay, we've got the answers coming in here. Oh, and it looks like the majority of you are active with projects, and a good amount of you actually doing some serious projects. So great. I think that this will be a really informative webinar for you then on the cloud management side. And now we're going to go to a second poll. And this is just to get a sense of how many of you are Rackspace customers, whether you're Rackspace Cloud customers or if you're using their hosting or maybe both. Or maybe you're just getting introduced to Rackspace via this webinar today. So if you could take a couple moments to answer this poll, that would be great. Okay, it looks like the answers are coming in, and here are our results. All right, also a good mix here of Rackspace customers and non-customers. Good. Well, we'll be introducing you to what Rackspace has to offer there for those who aren't yet, and then some of you that are already familiar with Rackspace, you'll get a little more info. And we've got one last poll, and that is to understand what role you play within your organization. So if you can take a moment to answer this one, let us know what group you're in. Okay, the answers are coming in here. Pretty good mix also across the board here. Really interesting seeing on the business side. That's a little bit more than normal, so great. Good to see some of those folks in, and then a lot of ops, dev, and IT, and that's pretty normal for us. All right, well, thanks for taking the time to answer those polls, and now I want to introduce you to the panel that we have speaking today. From RightScale, we've got Bailey Caldwell, and he's our Senior Director of Business Development and works very closely with Rackspace. And then we have Toby Owen from Rackspace, and he works in their Hybrid Cloud Solution Group. And then Ryan Geyer will be taking us through the demo, and he's a sales engineer with RightScale. And then we've got a couple people on the Q&A line, and that's Chad Carthy from RightScale as well as Chris Williams. And the way that we work our webinars is we have Chad and Chris on the line so that if you have questions during the course of the webinar, you can just use your GoToWebinar chat box and ask those questions, and they'll answer them real time so that you can just get your answers during the course of the webinar. So feel free to use that through the whole hour, as well as submit your questions that then we'll pull off for live Q&A. We have a live Q&A with the panel at the end. So any burning questions that you want them to answer, also let us know there. And from there, now I'll take us into the agenda. We're going to first go over cloud management and what RightScale offers and why it's important to have a cloud management partner. And then Toby will take us through Rackspace and some facts about Rackspace, as well as he'll delve into Rack Connect. And then we'll do the demo. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have the live Q&A at the end. So just keep those questions coming during the course of the webinar. And with that, I want to introduce Bailey Caldwell, and he'll start off the webinar today. Bailey, take it away.
Thank you, Elise. Hi, everyone. Glad you're here. Super excited to talk about the RightScale Rackspace partnership. Just going to briefly review RightScale's background and what we're all about, and then get right into the meat of this webinar. So RightScale's been in cloud management for 4 years, essentially since the beginning of cloud. Because of that, we're involved in managing some of the largest infrastructures in the cloud today. As you can see below, we have over 3 million users or servers that have been launched in the cloud and over 45,000 users. A couple of our logos are listed here. It's essentially our A to Z of customers. Why cloud management with RightScale? We really focus on providing agility, which is how you launch and manage servers in the cloud, choice, which is our multi-cloud library, as well as the components of our infrastructure, and control to monitor and manage those deployments. RightScale works by integrating at the infrastructure as a service layer through the API. By doing that, we're able to drive applications through our platform into the cloud of choice for your infrastructure provider. I'm excited to talk about the partnership with Rackspace, and would like to hand it over to Toby to give you more information on what Rackspace is all about. Toby?
I want to give a little bit of background on Rackspace for those of you that aren't familiar. We are about a 13-year-old company that's always been involved in hosting, and as you kind of see on this page, we're becoming a more cloud-centric company. We have your traditional managed hosting, which is how we started. We run a very large public cloud business as well. We also do some application and email hosting services as well. We are based in San Antonio, Texas. We have offices around the world, as well as data centers internationally. We're growing pretty quickly. We're getting close to about 4,000 rackers, we call them, which are employees at Rackspace. And we're now over 150,000 customers. As you kind of see the growth trajectory there on the chart, I think the important part on this slide really is that we are in a combined revenue world. We are a leader in the hosting space, and we're also recognized as leader by Gartner. In terms of our cloud products, we've got offerings all over the board, really. We've got compute, which is cloud servers. We've got storage, which is called cloud files. We've got a multi-tenant load balancing option called cloud load balancers. We have Rack Connect, which is really enabling hybrid clouds within Rackspace, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Bailey started to as well. But that's really starting to extend our cloud portfolio into what was traditional managed hosting and really start to make that managed hosting feel a little bit more cloudy, if you will. We also have a hosted private cloud option, which is a single tenant cloud, which is virtualization. And then we have professional services to help you build OpenStack clouds, either at Rackspace or in your own data center. Rack Connect is our offering, it's our term around hybrid hosting within Rackspace. And give you just a quick overview of how this works. We've got a couple of different networking platforms we support here, and we will connect your dedicated infrastructure, your managed hosting infrastructure, with the Rackspace cloud over our internal network, so there's no charge for bandwidth in between those platforms. It gives you an automated connection. All of that is internal, high-speed, low latency, as well as having automation around provisioning of cloud servers. To add capacity, remove capacity, those servers in the cloud are automatically added and removed from your infrastructure. Now, this architecture gives you a number of advantages over having to choose just cloud or just dedicated. Some of our customers choose dedicated hosting because they need specific requirements, particularly a common scenario would be for a database. They've got a lot of I/O coming out of that database, and that's going to perform really well on a large, multi-core box with lots of RAM and solid-state drives. But they might also want the flexibility of cloud for their web tier, where they can add capacity when they have a big spike in traffic, and then decommission that capacity when they no longer need that, and they're only paying for the time where they're running in the cloud. And so Rack Connect really gives you a way to start to kind of get the best of both worlds. In conjunction with the load balancer that we have pictured here, you You also have the ability to automatically load balance those cloud servers when they come online. So turn this slide into a little bit of a case study. This is a customer that we have that you may recognize. Under Armour sells athletic apparel to consumers as well as lots of sports teams, and they've got a large online presence, and so they host a Rackspace because they want to make sure their site is available. And the way that they've deployed their infrastructure at Rackspace is that they're running we can click forward here.
Oh, sorry.
They're using an F5 load balancer, like we showed in the diagram, to connect dedicated and cloud. They're using cloud for their product catalog, so you can browse through. There's lots of static content associated with that part of their application, which works really well in the cloud. And then they're doing all of their secure transactions, shopping cart, all of that customer data is stored on dedicated single-tenant hardware. So this is a way for them to maintain compliance and security of those customer records while also using cloud for scalability and as well for them. They've got a lot of static content, and so they're able to leverage the content delivery network to push that content out to their customers as well. And Bailey had started in on some different use cases and ways that customers are deploying. This is a very common deployment of Connect at Rackspace, running a database on a physical box and web and maybe app servers in the cloud, using a firewall to link their dedicated and cloud. One nice thing about this architecture is this actually puts your cloud servers behind the firewall, and so you're able to get some additional protection and security in your cloud environment. Now, in conjunction with RightScale, you've also got the ability to scale those cloud servers automatically. So in terms of using server templates to manage your configuration, to set triggers on scaling events, you've really got a very flexible infrastructure that can respond to the traffic demands that may change on your site day to day. This is a picture that's probably more similar to the environment for like an Under Armour that we saw before. And this just shows what an enterprise business or a large online business might use. We've got high availability in the network stack for firewalls and load balancers, and we've got clustering for the database. You've got the capability to run private cloud, which is single tenant, but it gives you obviously some of the flexibility of cloud in terms of provisioning and reallocating resources. SAN storage as well for really fast and large storage requirements, and then a lot of capacity in the cloud. Again, with RightScale, this environment really starts to shine because you've got a lot of flexibility on where to deploy different workloads within your application, whether that's going to run best in the database cluster or can scale really well horizontally. And then with RightScale, you've got a single pane of glass to manage that, as well as to instrument some scaling events, things like that if you'd like. This is a new kind of use case that we're seeing a lot of interest around because we're using RackConnect, or we're using a firewall rather for RackConnect. We've got the capability to terminate an SSL tunnel between our customers and Rackspace, and so this gives a nice way to use Rackspace as an extension of your own data center. A nice advantage of this in partnership with RightScale is now you've got the ability to have a single pane of glass to manage both your on-premise cloud, say you're running a private cloud on OpenStack, as well as the cloud and RackConnect environment at Rackspace, have it all within a single management console.
Thanks, Toby. We're going to move now into the demo. I wanted to just re-articulate some of what Toby described, but also make sure that everyone understands the integration components of the RightScale Rackspace solution. Today we're integrated with cloud servers, cloud files, cloud load balancers, and RackConnect. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Geyer, who's first going to review the architecture of the demo and then get into the combined solution.
Thank you, Bailey. So one of the things that we're going to show you in the demo is this three-tiered architecture that we've actually got set up in the RightScale dashboard. The particular implementation that we're going to show you uses cloud load balancers out in front as the load balancing tier, and then also has an auto-scaling array of application servers that are running PHP to support a PHP application server. And then the third tier uses a MySQL master-slave database configuration and uses cloud files for backing up those database files so that you can set up additional servers and also have that disaster recovery option. So let's get right into the demo here. So the first thing you see, I've already logged into the dashboard here, and this is sort of the landing page that you get. We have a number of different widgets that you can customize here and show different things that are custom to your view and your role within the IT organization. What I want to show you first, though, is the way that we actually add agility and really turbocharge the Rackspace Cloud by offering pre-built configurations for servers. So the place that you find that is in our multi-cloud marketplace. I'm going to go ahead and click into that and these server templates.
Ryan, can you just briefly describe what a server template is?
Sure. So while this is loading, a server template is that pre-built configuration of a server. So what we do is we start out with a base operating system image. In the case of the Rackspace Cloud, we support CentOS 5.6 and Ubuntu 10.04. And we start with that base operating system image, and then using automation, we configure that running server into a particular role.
Ryan, we also support Windows, is that right?
That's correct. We have Windows 2008 R2 for Rackspace, and there are some pre-built configurations for that. I'm going to actually filter the server template library by server templates which are supported on the Rackspace Cloud, and you'll see many of the options that are here. As Bailey mentioned, Microsoft IIS application server is one of the options. We have base server templates that you can use as a starting point for customization to create your own server template for your own type of configuration for an application or service that you may not see listed here. So what I want to do is show you how easy it is to import this PHP application server template and launch an instance from it. So you click into this and it describes what the server template is, how it works, and the assets that are included in it. You can then import it into your RightScale account. Once you've done that, you have the ability to launch many instances from this one template or this one blueprint of a server. So the way that you do that is by adding that server to a deployment. And we'll talk about what a deployment is in a moment here. But by adding a server, you get to choose the cloud that you're going to associate this server with. In this case, we just have the Rackspace Cloud listed, but these server templates are modular and can support multiple clouds, so you can launch this not only in Rackspace, but to Toby's point, you can launch this same server template, this same workload, in a private cloud environment, either on-premise or in the hosted Rackspace private cloud. So we're going to go ahead and complete this, and we'll get dropped into our wizard that gives you a few more options for this server template. So we're going to do give this a name. And then we have some options here of which underlying operating system we're going to use for this server. These are the two that are supported, CentOS 5.6 and 10.04, as we mentioned before. If you don't pick one, there's a default for the server template, which is the CentOS image. So we're going to select that. And then you select the size of the Rackspace Cloud server that you're going to launch. You have the various options here. We're just going to select the 256 and then click into the next page, which is a confirmation page. So this is going to confirm your selections. We're going to launch a server in the Rackspace cloud. This is the name that it's going to have. It's going to be part of the Cloud Load Balance 3-tier deployment, which again we'll get to in just a moment. And it will leverage this server template or this configuration, which is a PHP application server. It also confirms some alerts, which are bound to the monitoring, which we'll also show you in a moment. And these are predefined at the server template level. So these are best practices that we've baked into that server template of conditions that you would be concerned about as a system administrator. So when we finish this, confirming our selections, this server gets added to a deployment. And the deployment is the next thing that we want to show you here. I can launch this server. I'm going to actually refrain from doing that and actually bring you up to the deployment level and show you what that looks like.
So Ryan, can you just describe deployments for the audience briefly, please?
Absolutely. So deployment is really the way that we show you systems rather than individual servers. So obviously we just imported a PHP application server and we set that up. A PHP application server can't serve an entire enterprise or even small business application on its own. It needs other servers to do its job. And that's what the deployment really represents here. We've got the master and slave MySQL database servers. These are also configured from server templates that bake in all of the automation and best practices for configuring and maintaining a MySQL database. It also has the automation for backing up those databases to Rackspace cloud files for backup purposes. We also have a load tester server, and this is used to send some synthetic traffic to this deployment so that we can show that for demonstration purposes. And then an application server that's currently running that we added to this deployment, which will be the single application server that's always there to accept traffic. Now, on its own, this single running PHP application server is unlikely to handle all of the traffic for this application. So what we actually are able to do by clicking into this application server, we can show you the monitoring that's available. I have a request to maybe zoom in a little bit so that this is easier to see. So if you give me just a moment, we'll do that. Hopefully that's a bit easier for everyone to see. Okay, so what I've done is from the deployment level, we'll actually go back here a little bit just so we find our place. We're up at the deployment level, which has all of the servers listed for this deployment. And we're going to click into the one static application server that's always running for this deployment and handling load. And in particular, we want to show you the monitoring tab. So you may have seen this already when we clicked into it. What this is we use CollectD to gather information about the performance of this particular server. And so we also are tracking things like the number of bytes going in and out of Apache, the number of Apache connections and Apache requests.
Sorry, we're just trying to fix our screen share over here. Bear with us. There we go.
There we go. Sorry for the technical difficulties here today. So this is, again, we'll just back up once more. This is the monitoring for this particular server. And we're tracking all sorts of performance metrics, in particular ones around Apache. So that since this is a PHP application server, we're going to be looking at things like the number of Apache connections and the amount of memory that's being used by Apache to determine that this single server that's in the deployment might be overwhelmed and need help. So this is where the automation of adding additional servers to this deployment to handle that additional load comes in. So if we go back up to the deployment level, not only at the top do we have the servers that are static, that are always running for this deployment, that are necessary to support this, but at the bottom we also have what we call a server array, and that's the auto-scaling piece of this deployment. So we have this array down at the bottom named app servers, and in this array, if we click into it, we'll see that that same PHP application server that's automatically deployed and configured to become a PHP application server is duplicated here in the application server array. So we use the same server template, PHP application server. It's using the same base operating system image, CentOS. We've chosen the same instance type of a 256 megabyte slice on Rackspace. And we have some rules about how many servers get launched and how many of those servers in the deployment together are having the same performance bottleneck. So if we're tracking the Apache connections, for instance, if a single server is overwhelmed and we're monitoring that metric, it alone can't unilaterally add more servers to this array. The other servers that are also handling load have to also have that condition. So that prevents a situation where one server might have a bug or might have a corner case where that one server is getting a lot of traffic or might be using a lot of CPU, but there's actually ample capacity in your deployment. So we have some kind of safety checks in there for that, and we want to make sure that all of the servers are in agreement before servers are added or removed from this array.
Brian, can you explain schedule-based events?
Absolutely. So the other option that we have besides the alert-based scaling, which I just described, is that you can also add and remove servers to an array based on a schedule. So this is very useful for e-commerce sites where the spikes and troughs in traffic are fairly predictable. You know that your customers are coming to your website and shopping during certain days and certain times of day. So you can proactively add and remove capacity to your deployment before that spike in traffic comes in, and then remove it when you know that that spike has subsided. So I want to get a little bit more into perhaps the detail of how RightScale really makes that possible. So we talked briefly about what server templates are. They're that base operating system and then scripts on top of that that are used to configure the server to its particular role. So as you might imagine, these servers that are coming up in the server array have to know about their environment. They have to know that they're going to connect to these database servers that are in the deployment. And they have to know, in this case, that they're going to connect to a cloud load balancer in order to become part of that application pool. So if we look at the server template for the PHP application server, when we look at the scripts tab, once the server comes up from that base operating system, in the case of our selections, we're running CentOS 5.6. Once that comes up, we then run this list of scripts, and that's the automation that happens through the RightScale dashboard and through the RightScale system. And we do some things that you might imagine as typical housekeeping tasks, setting up an IP tables firewall, setting up an NTP server for time, changing our swap settings and so forth. And we go through all the steps to configure this to become a PHP application server, including setting up our database connection, which we do with this script. We pull down the application code that's going to be running on this particular server. So we'll pull this, in this case, from a Git repository that's got the current production build of the application that's going here. And then the very last step is a script that runs to actually register this server with the Rackspace Cloud Load Balancer. So once this server is up and it's configured and it's ready to accept traffic, it then reaches out and it's aware of its environment, aware of the Cloud Load Balancer that's assigned to this deployment, and it's able to reach out and register itself with that Cloud Load Balancer. So there's no steps that the system administrator has to take manually to get this process to happen. So as each server comes up in that server array, it configures itself, pulls down the latest application code, connects itself to the database, and then also connects itself to the load balancer. And then the operational scripts here are for tasks that you might do sort of ad hoc that you would go into the RightScale dashboard to perform. You can also automate these through an API. So in this case, for a PHP application server, that's things like grabbing the latest version of the application code, maybe making changes to our IP tables firewall configuration. And then also we can choose to register or deregister this server from the cloud load balancer. So a useful scenario might be that you want to deploy the latest version of the application code. You would use the deregister script to remove this server from the cloud load balance pool, then run the the script to grab the latest version of the application code, and then re-add the server to the cloud load balance pool. So in this way, you can actually roll out a new version of your application code on each server in sequence rather than taking down your server for a maintenance period. The last section here are the decommission scripts. So again, in that auto-scaling scenario, when a server comes up, it's great. It configures itself and registers itself with its environment. Likewise, when those servers are terminated because they're no longer needed for the spike in traffic, they need to remove themselves from the environment. So they need to deregister themselves from the cloud load balancer and then also tell the database server that they no longer need to communicate with the database server. This actually goes in and makes an IP tables firewall change on the database server. So the other thing that I want to show you in a little bit more detail that will show the integration with cloud files is on the database server template. So this database manager server template is designed under scripts to, on a schedule, back up the data in your database and copy it down to cloud files. So this is useful obviously for disaster recovery purposes should there be a problem with the virtual machine that you're running your database server on, but also for simple maintenance tasks like setting up the replicated database server, possibly setting up that replicated database server in a different cloud or in a different region, possibly having one running in the Rackspace cloud and having a disaster recovery site on your private cloud, for instance. So these, again, the boot scripts for this server template configure all of the things necessary to get this running as a MySQL server, installs MySQL, sets up DNS, and then also has a script here that goes and finds all of the application servers that are in the deployment. So this is again highlighting the ability for us for RightScale to make servers aware of their environment and allow you to manage systems rather than servers. In this case, this database server has a single script that will go and find all of the application servers that are in the deployment based on a tag in RightScale and make a change to the IP tables firewall, allowing those application servers to access the database. So again, making this database server aware of the application servers as well as the application servers aware of this database server. It allows a great deal of automation and flexibility in making these servers aware of their environment. So under the operational scripts, I want to show you db do backup. This is the actual script that does the work to back up the MySQL database and copy it down to cloud files. The technology we're using here is actually to create an LVM partition, and we're able to make a snapshot of that requires no downtime for your database, so you can continue having read and write operations occurring while that LVM snapshot occurs. It's a point-in-time snapshot that we then break up into smaller pieces and then upload to cloud files over the back-end network. So that happens very quickly and in the background without affecting the uptime of your database server. So that's the full end-to-end of that particular deployment, the Cloud Load Balance 3-tier deployment that shows the load balancer, the application tier that is automatically scaling, and then also running that master and slave database server all in the cloud, all on Rackspace.
Ryan, so thanks for the great demo. Perhaps you can describe the technique which uses those same capabilities that we're using to integrate with the Rack Connect offering?
Certainly. So in the case of a Rack Connect deployment, you might have those database servers running on dedicated hardware in the Rackspace hosting. And you might also have the F5 load balancer as the front-ended load balancer for that. So in that case, you'd have your PHP application server still in the deployment, and that automatically scaling application tier, that array that has those PHP application servers. And we have automation built into our system that allows that server, when it comes up, instead of registering itself with the cloud load balancer, it would register itself with that F5 load balancer in the Rack Connect environment. In the same way, we'd be able to pass into that application server parameters for those scripts that run on boot to have it connect to a database server that's on the dedicated side as well. So we use a lot of the same automation techniques to give you that auto scaling and that really flexible environment for a Rack connected environment as well.
Thanks, Ryan. Toby, I wanted to ask you to just provide a little more color on how you see the RightScale and Rack Connect solutions and some specific use cases that we've been working on in the partnership, but I'd like you to touch on that again, if you will.
Absolutely. So I think we just talked about one of them, which is the ability to integrate with various types of load balancing at Rackspace, right? So we looked at the integration with cloud load balancers for auto scaling. So not only does RightScale instrument the decision and the addition of how to add capacity in the cloud, but also making sure it's in the appropriate load balance pool. And that actually works with our cloud load balancer product as well as our physical load balancers with Rack Connect. So that gives customers a lot of flexibility around what their needs are from a performance standpoint. If they've got other specific needs that would require a hardware load balancer versus a software one, things like that. I also think we talked a little bit about this earlier, but kind of reiterate that the idea of server templating to truly automate a scale event. I can't understate this enough how important that is, because Rack Connect, we've done a lot of work to make all of the infrastructure provisioning as close to automatic as possible. But what we haven't done is create a mechanism to detect when additional capacity is needed. And so I think that's a big place where the partnership with RightScale shines, is that we can add, RightScale can give you the tools to decide when your application needs to scale and then do that scaling for you. And then we've instrumented how that can connect back into your dedicated environment. So you've got a really flexible solution. I think some common use cases that we see for that, we've definitely heard demand around auto scaling as well. Would be an e-commerce site that may have some periods of time where they can predict load, but they may not be able to predict it to the degree of which they're going to see a spike. I think social media and marketing promotions are another great example where we're expecting, a load of X number of users, but we far exceeded that expectation, and you hear these stories all the time in the news, right? Where someone launches a new product and it just goes viral, and the site comes down, which is exactly what you don't want to happen. And so I think to really be set up for those types of events, a Rack Connect environment gives you flexibility to have, a physical infrastructure set up for kind of your base level load, and then use the cloud to add additional capacity, and use RightScale to scale that environment automatically or even on a schedule, right? That's another great feature, I think, where we see a lot of development and test work that happens in the cloud, and that's done because it's more cost effective. But it's actually, if you don't turn those cloud servers off when you're not using them, you sort of lose some of that cost-effective nature, and so the scheduler service can really help bring some discipline and automation to that to make sure that you're going to end up with a bill like you were expecting at the end of the month. And so I think that's another great use case as well.
Great. Thanks, Toby. Just to remind everyone, we still have about 15 minutes for questions. This webinar will be available at rightscale.com/webinars. So let's get to some other questions that have come in while we've been chatting away here. The first one is, can you run a multiple web application server setup like the one you demoed from the free edition? If not, what limitations are there with free? So without divulging anything, we're making some modifications to our plans over the next couple months. For now, the free edition does not allow you to run arrays, so you would need an edition of RightScale in order to accomplish that. I will mention that if you call sales and talk about your requirements, we do have VIP trials that will allow you to use more functionality than the base free edition. But we could talk about your requirements in that regard. Toby, there's a question here for you, which is, can you touch on some of the key differences between EC2 S3 EBS solutions and the Rackspace cloud offerings?
Sure, absolutely. I think you know, some of the high-level differences. I'd say first and foremost, at Rackspace, we really strive to be known as a service company, and so I think that's one of the ways that we're trying to differentiate as a hosting company, and I think we've gained a good reputation in the hosting space for the fanatical support that we provide, and that's just our term for really great customer support. So I think that's one difference, and it's available whether you're a managed hosting customer or a Rackspace cloud customer or a hybrid customer at Rackspace. In terms of the product offerings, I think a couple of things to point out. Storage is one of them. If you're looking at local storage on a cloud volume, all of our storage is persistent, meaning your images will persist through a reboot, or if there's a hardware failure on the physical infrastructure underneath your server, we have RAID protection on all those drives. And I think another big point of difference would be the hybrid capability. The ability within a data center to have physical infrastructure, whether that's dedicated SAN or shared SAN, a database cluster connected to an on-demand utility-based cloud. And another feature would be the various security products that we sell in the managed hosting space can also be used when you use RackConnect to protect your cloud as well. For example, distributed denial of service prevention, web application firewalls, intrusion detection to some degree. All of those things can help protect your entire environment at Rackspace. And I think that's a highlight. Amazon certainly has a lot of products and a lot of various features, but those are some of the places where I see us differently.
Thanks, Toby. Let's give a couple to Ryan here. So Ryan, can you execute the operation scripts across all nodes at any time? For example, if you want to update the code on all your servers.
Sure. So at the deployment level, there were a number of tabs at the top. One of those tabs is a scripts tab, and you can run any one of the operational scripts for that deployment across one or many of the nodes inside of that deployment. You actually have the option to use a checkbox to select all or just a few from that list of servers and run that single operational script across all the servers in that deployment. So yes, you can absolutely do that.
So Ryan, another one. I know one of the original issues with Rackspace was the inability to import custom images. Has this changed? And if not, how are you working on that issue to support new server templates?
So there is some limitation in being able to import custom images that become public for other users. Through our partnership with Rackspace, we've been able to upload those base multi-cloud images, we call them, that are those base operating system images, and we have an agent running on them. But the great news about that is that you don't need to upload custom images in order to support new server templates. The server template uses the same operating system image for every single server template. The MySQL server template that I showed you, as well as the PHP application server, use the same image. Once that virtual machine is up and running from that base operating system image, then the actual configuration to become a MySQL server or PHP application server is all in those boot scripts that run on startup.
Thanks, Ryan. Toby, I think a good question. It's a bit of a long one, but I want to give you enough time to answer it. So is the data encrypted in transit at rest? Sorry, my screen just moved. So is the data encrypted in transit and at rest in the hybrid model, which uses SSL to connect a private data center to the multi-tenant cloud virtual servers? And does the SSL extend the private cloud's directory services and tools monitoring in the Rack's multi-tenant cloud server farm? The question the person asking is trying to understand how this compares to CloudSwitch or Citrix hybrid cloud solution.
Yeah, and that is a really great question, actually. I don't think it's a direct parallel to those offerings. To help you kind of understand what this is, we're doing a site-to-site VPN tunnel, and so we can support SSL VPNs or IPsec VPNs between some off-premise site, whether that's a co-location facility or your own data center, and Rackspace. And so obviously that's encrypted between the data centers. It doesn't offer encryption for data at rest. That would need to be handled either within the storage layer or within the application. In terms of extending directory services, certainly those can be extended, but that would be done through the directory service itself. So for example, we have customers running Active Directory on dedicated hardware at Rackspace, and they can add, with Rack Connect, they can add their cloud servers into that directory. We don't offer a directory service level kind of API plugin like via SAML or something like that. That is coming, but we don't have that available today. And I think I covered all of that. So again, SSL is an option for VPN as well as IPsec. There's also another option, which is something that we're seeing interest in, particularly with our larger customers, and that is to bring a private leased line into the Rackspace data center. And we can do that as well through essentially any bandwidth provider. We can terminate that directly within your managed hosting configuration. So if you wanted to connect your data center to Rackspace and not use public transit at all, that's certainly an option as well. And that'll give you, obviously, a single tenant private connection. We can encrypt that or not. And that may give you a little bit more flexibility and control over what that bandwidth profile looks like.
Great. Thanks, Toby. So just another reminder that this webinar will be available online at rightscale.com/webinars. And if you are interested in signing up for an account and trying out the service, you can register for a free account. If you need to do more and hopefully want to do more, please contact the RightScale sales team. You can see the number on your screen. A couple of questions that we ought to knock out. Does RightScale offer training? Ryan, do you want to describe some of the training?
Certainly. So we offer a number of different trainings. Probably the most useful, though, is the RightScale Jumpstart training, where we really walk you through the base tenants, really explain what deployments are and server templates are in greater detail. And you get a hands-on experience of really setting up your own three-tiered environment using those server template assets. So we offer that, and that's a great option. In fact, we have a Jumpstart training, I think, that is preceding the RightScale conference, user conference in Santa Clara, which you see on the screen there. So I think we can provide some sign-up details for that.
Yeah, great point. On Tuesday the 8th, we're doing a Jumpstart training in Santa Clara, so hit our website and please join us there. Toby, a couple questions. What can you tell people about how many customers are using Rack Connect today, and what kind of costs are they looking at if they're interested in that product?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we'll start with the cost first because that's nice to answer. It's free as long as you've got one of the supported network devices in your managed hosting configuration, and that's a Cisco firewall or an F5 load balancer today, and we're we're planning on releasing functionality on a couple of other network platforms as well. So it'd be a normal hosting contract for that network device, and Rack Connect is a free configuration. In terms of scale, we've really seen a tremendous amount of growth in the last year since we've offered Rack Connect, where this is now, I would say, over 10% for our medium and large size customers are using Rack Connect. So it's definitely moved from a niche product to a more mainstream product for our customers. And I'll also give a little preview that we're planning a pretty major feature release for Rack Connect in the next week or so, and so kind of keep your eyes out open for that. But we'll be talking more about that in the next week.
Excellent, thank you, Toby. So we're nearing the top of the hour. I think we've answered most of the questions, at least that we're seeing coming in. Just again, to remind people, please call RightScale if you're interested in learning more. And our conference is next week at the Cloud Expo. Definitely hit our website if you're in town and come by and learn a lot about how people are using the cloud. In fact, Toby will be there presenting more information about the Rack Connect solution. So I think in summation, thanks everybody for joining. We're really excited to hear from you in the future about how you can leverage RightScale and the Rackspace combined solution. And I think that brings our webinar to an end.